Hey there, welcome back to another video. This time around, it is a review of the 1995 film, Kids. Now, this is considered to be one of the more controversial films of the 90s because of its subject matter and its overall focus. And I can see why it definitely touched a nerve with certain audiences back in 1995, and why it still touches a nerve with certain people to this day. I wasn't really that big of a fan of this film, but I will get into more of the reasons why soon enough. But I want to give a special shout out first to Seth for requesting this particular review. If there is a film you'd like to see me review or a topic you would like to hear me discuss, feel free to donate to my PayPal. The link will be in the video description. Now, Kids is a film directed by Larry Clark, and it features a screenplay by Harmony Korine, who is a screenwriter that at the time was very sought after because of his unique take on things in terms of dialogue and how he was willing to be edgy and counterculture and so on and so forth. Larry Clark is also a filmmaker who's pretty well known for making these kind of counterculture, controversial films when it comes to the subject matter. Now, I personally don't think it's a 2 thumbs up film like Siskel and Ebert did. I don't think it's a masterwork like Peter Travers felt this film was. I think this film is pretty empty and pretty shallow and hollow at the end of the day. Once you get past the shock value of kids doing debaucherous things like drinking and doing drugs and fucking and talking about fucking and committing violent acts. Other than the AIDS subplot, there's nothing to this film. It's very empty in terms of its characters, in terms of its overall size, scope, and impact. To me personally, as a story, it was severely lacking in so many important areas. For the most part, once the film just didn't really go anywhere other than just one shock moment after the next, it really lost me. I did not really care what was going on. I didn't care what would happen to these kids, especially the 2 leads, which this film chooses to focus on. And I honestly think that was a massive error on Korine and Clark's part, to focus pretty much the entire narrative on Telly and Casper. These 2 characters are absolutely despicable. They are just awful people. And they're also not that enjoyable to watch. I know some people have found them entertaining. If you feel that way, teach their own. We agree to disagree, because I just found them to be incredibly obnoxious and just difficult to watch because of just how just terrible they are. I mean, for instance, Casper, he's not friendly. He's just a punk-ass kid who spends most of his time drinking and doing drugs. Oh, and when he's not doing that, he's raping unconscious women. Telly is this proto-McLovin-looking kid who thinks he's modern-day Lothario, and he has a thing for fucking virgins, so he goes around and targets girls that are multiple years younger than him so he can pop their cherries. Oh, and by the way, he also has AIDS, so he's spreading AIDS to these underage girls without them knowing. that's when you get into, I guess, the only character in the film that's remotely likable in some shape or form, in Jenny, other than maybe Ruby. But Ruby isn't even in the film that much. He's in it for like maybe a couple scenes. Most of the focus is on Telly and Casper, and I'm sorry, after the initial burst of chaotic energy from these two, it got tiresome for me. I really got sick and tired of seeing them on my screen and having to hear them talk all kinds of shit and act like spoiled punk ass kids. And I guess that's the point. It's trying to... I mean, Larry Clark is quoted here. He says, "I wanted to present the way kids see things, but without all this baggage. This morality that these old middle-aged Hollywood guys bring to it. Kids don't think that way. They're living in the moment, not thinking about anything beyond that, and that's what I wanted to catch." And I think, you know, he did manage to capture that, along with Corny and his screenplay, but... this isn't a documentary. So if this was a documentary, I could probably deal with the lack of character development, the lack of an engaging storyline and plot. But it's a film. So you need to have those things in order to make the narrative effective. Otherwise, it falls incredibly flat. And I feel that there was potential to really make this hammer pretty hard, or even harder, when it comes to the overall impact of the story. Why not actually show the aftermath of Telly's sex reign of terror? You know, essentially that's what it was. It is. It's a reign of terror on his part, because he's going around spreading AIDS to these underage girls. So why not have a sequence where he comes to grips and comes face to face with that fact that he's a carrier and that he's been doing this entire time? And maybe show Casper and Jenny and some of the other kids in an ICU at the end of the film, crippled with AIDS. It's not a pretty sight, but that's the reality of this overall plot here. It seems like the AIDS part of it, other than a few scenes, is kind of not really made that big of a deal in comparison to the other elements of this film in terms of its shock value sequences, with kids kissing for uncomfortably long amounts of time, the orgy scenes, which, to be honest, it's not as bad as you think, but at the same time, it's what it's insinuating is pretty seedy, to say the least. Sequences of various different kids smoking pot and drinking, doing whippets, the skate park scene where a bunch of kids gang up on this guy and beat the shit out of him. There are so many of these scenes that, okay, alright, you're trying to create this a glimpse of fractured youth in the 90s, but... and, you know, other moments like in the club when kids are drinking and doing drugs, it just became incredibly derivative to me. Just, you know, okay, there's just more kids doing drugs and drinking. Alrighty, okay, whatever. The only plot line that really drew me in was with Jenny and her trying to find Telly to tell him that, you know, he has AIDS and you might want to do something about it so you don't spread it to other girls. But she doesn't do anything either. And that honestly is a wasted subplot. It's the most compelling subplot in the entire story, and even it doesn't go anywhere. She gets high on some kind of ecstasy drug or whatever, shuffles her way to the block or apartment or whatever where Telly is and a bunch of his other friends. And she passes out on the couch because she's the drug is clearly affecting her. She even goes in and sees that Telly is going to fuck this other girl and give her AIDS, and she just fucking doesn't do anything and just sits down on the couch and passes out. You're like, what? So it seemed like it was setting it up as if she was going to confront him, and then she never confronts him. Not once. Instead, the last scene we see with her is her getting raped by Casper while she's unconscious sitting on the couch. And the last scene of the film is Casper waking up like, what the hell did we do last night, or something? What the hell happened? Or some kind of line of dialogue like that. And I guess that was improvised by Casper. I don't get it. What is it? Just kids doing immoral things? Okay, all right. I'm not one of those people that thinks that that's something so far out of left field. It's not surprising or shocking to me that kids do this kind of shit. I never really bought into this idea that kids are saints and so on and so forth. Kids, just like adults, are affected by their environment. They're affected by those around them, their economic status, the location, the place that they are living in, who they spend time with. So the fact that kids are doing these kind of things, it's not as inherently shocking to me as it might have been for people who saw it back in the 90s, especially parents who were up in arms about this movie. There were protests and all kinds of stuff in regards to this film. And I don't think it's really that shocking. It's like, oh, kids do this kind of stuff. Not really surprised that there are kids out there who start drinking and doing drugs at an early age. Kids out there that think with what's inside their pants instead of what's inside of their head. It's really not that surprising. Or, girls talking about fucking or sucking dick. Like, that's not something that I think is that unique, so to speak. I think that's something that definitely occurs. But I will give the film this. It did break some new ground in terms of opening up the conversation about these kind of things, which is something that you didn't see a whole lot of back in this particular time period. There's a lot of sheltered views that were rising to the forefront when it comes to the discussion around kids having sex and doing drugs and drinking and so on and doing all that kind of stuff. But here's the thing. Take these kids, age them up, and put them in a plot, put them in this exact same plot, and have them be all adults. And tell me whether or not this film is at all compelling or has a narrative that's strong enough to carry the film for an hour and a half. Because I don't think that's the case. If this was a bunch of adults being rowdy and violent and drinking and talking about fucking all the time and doing all this other immoral shit, at least in terms of what some people's ideas of mortals are, you'd be like, okay, what's the point? That's the thing. Like, ultimately, if that's all you have, is your shock value. You don't have much of a story and you don't have much of a film. But I think it is, at the end of the day, still an important film for opening up the discussion about kids doing these kinds of things, and also specifically about kids and sex and the dangers of AIDS and sexually transmitted diseases, because it's something that really is considered taboo, but kids are having sex. So if teenagers and kids are, being promiscuous, then they really don't need to be sheltered when it comes to the dangers of intercourse. So I feel that this film does a good job in terms of showcasing the reality of that. And I know it's not necessarily probably intended to be an entertaining film. I was not expecting that from this movie. I just wanted a compelling drama, and I didn't really get that from this movie, because I didn't really latch on to most of the characters, and a lot of the dialogue that's supposed to be so real, I found to be laughable. I thought it was so laughable and overwrought and over the top. With Telly and Casper talking like they're gangster rappers and shit. I know at this time there probably were kids that did act like that, but it just came across so forced to me, to the point where it's like, okay, I get it. They're a bunch of punk-ass kids. All right, fine. Do they have anything redeemable about them? Well, that's the point. They don't have any redeemable qualities. Then why the fuck should I care? So that's the problem. It's like, why the fuck should I care about these kids? Whether they live or die of AIDS, whether Telly gets hit by a fucking car and Casper gets thrown into a trash compactor, why the fuck should I care what happens to any of these kids? Because the film and its narrative never give me a reason to. That being said, I will give Larry Clark credit for his direction. I think he did a really great job capturing this gritty guerrilla style kind of filmmaking when it comes to the look of the film. He wanted to have a documentary look and feel to it, and I think he definitely did achieve that. Certain scenes in this are honestly quite impressive from a directorial standpoint in terms of their visuals, like the club sequence with Jenny, and when she's going through the club and you have all these different colors and everything. I thought that really was a genuinely impressive sequence. And there are a few other moments like that really crapture. I don't know why that came out that way, but there are a lot of moments that really capture that genuine vibe that the film is trying to go for, of these wayward teens going through the motions and kind of being pulled in different directions by their instincts, but they're not really thinking about things that much. So in a lot of ways they're in this kind of trance, and I felt that the film did a good job really bringing that trance-like state that a lot of kids were in and still are in to this day, and making it a reality. But I'm not as impressed with Harmony Corney's script as a lot of other people are. I thought the screenplay was just more shock value on top of more shock value with not much real substance. That's just me personally. I like the music, the score, the songs that were used for the film, especially the rap, the hip-hop tracks. I thought those are really inspired in terms of the songs that they used. I thought they really captured the overall feelings of these teenagers quite well. And performance-wise, I thought these kids, they did a genuinely good job when it comes to their performances. Justin Pierce, I guess he passed away, so may he rest in peace. Justin Pierce was actually just a street kid that Larry liked. He liked his attitude, his personality, and thought it would fit perfectly for what he was trying to go for. And I think it does, but doesn't make the character really that likable. He's like a even more annoying and punk version of Evil Ed from Fright Night. And then you got Proto McLovin, Leo Fitzpatrick. I think the performance is fine, but I think he was miscast. I do not buy this Proto McLovin from Superbad looking motherfucker as this guy who's getting all the ladies. I don't fucking buy it. It's not believable. Okay? I see McLovin in the mirror pretty much every day. I know what I'm talking about. I don't buy myself being that kind of ladies' man, so I don't buy him being that kind of ladies' man either. It's a little unbelievable, even for a film that is essentially fiction, but it's hyper. It's not just. I guess hyper reality isn't really the right word, but it's definitely trying to be closer to reality than fiction. So if you're gonna try to do that, cast someone that you could actually buy getting all these women to fall for him. Because him just saying the things I want to hear, not enough. I'm sorry. You can ask any girl. They're probably going to be like, I don't care. You know, you can say all the things I want to hear, but I want more than that. And it's probably the same when it comes to, you know, girls of any age. Did he do any research? Did he talk to any of these girls? See, that's the thing. It's also a film that pretty much focuses more on the guys than it does the girls, and the girls are more interesting in terms of characters. I think it would have been an interesting bit of research to talk to young girls, to talk to young boys, and get their ideas of what they think or feel about the kind of subjects and the kind of themes that are going on in the film. Talk to your actors that you hire for the movie, get their input, and then put it into the screenplay. I think that would make it even more authentic. And I could see why Chloë Sevigny and Rosario Dawson wound up really getting a lot of spotlight because of this film. I mean, Rosario Dawson is only in the film for like 2 minutes, if even that. And, well, it's just probably more than that, but not really anything more than like 5 minutes. And even at a young age, she showed that she had a certain amount of charisma and screen presence. So I can see why people looked at her as a rising star, as well as Chloe. So I think the film, at the end of the day, technically, it's well made when it comes to its direction, when it comes to the cinematography by Eric Edwards. The film has this music video, home video quality to it, and I think that was definitely intentional. And I just wish that this is a movie that had more to say. It seems like, oh, it's a wake-up call to the world, but it's the kind of alarm that is just repetitive and plays the same note over and over again. So then you're just easily able to ignore it and then fall back to sleep by the end of it. You can just press the snooze button, or not even press the snooze button. Just be like, oh, whatever, it's buzzing at me about drugs and alcohol and sex and AIDS. All right, I get it. I understand. All of these things are bad. All of these things are acts that young kids are doing, or at least some young kids are doing in America. Okay, got anything else to say? You got any other notes or warnings for me. It's just one of those things where I think it's gonna speak to people differently. I think there's going to be some people who will see this and it'll really captivate them, and they'll be really compelled by it in terms of just the fact that these kids are doing all these things. But there'll be other people who are going to be like me, who are just going to be like, all right, is that it? That's just kind of how I felt about the movie. It's just, it was, at the end of the day, average at best and below average at worst, because I just could not get into these characters, and they were doing things that were despicable, and they were doing them in ways that weren't really that interesting in terms of how they were shot or how they were edited, and they also became pretty repetitive after a while, much like this video. I apologize. And it just lost its impact as the film got further and further along. So I think it should have been more focused on characters and getting to know these kids on a much more deeper level. So then when you see all these things happening, then it really manages to stick with you. I actually would have started out showing these kids as initially kids that are somewhat likable, not necessarily cookie cutter, but you get a glimpse into their home lives, you get a glimpse into the bright sides of their lives, and then you pull the rug out from underneath the audience and you show them doing all these crazy things. You show them drinking and doing drugs and having all this kind of all these bouts of unprotected sex, and then you really hammer home the dangers of it by showing them and the effects of AIDS firsthand, up close and personal. But that's just my particular I guess preference or personal take on this film. I don't really have anything else to say about the movie. It's kind of a difficult film to really talk about, to be honest. If it sounded like I was a little awkward, to be honest, I am a little awkward thinking about this movie and talking about it, considering the subject matter. But I would say if it's something that interests you, give it a watch. I think it might speak to you on a much more deeper level than it did to me. Anyway, as always, thanks for watching my review, and I'll see you later. See ya.